Okay. What's a chatty bunch? You guys are having a good time just chatting. I love it. You guys having a good time? Yeah. Yep. I'm sorry, say what? Were you having a good time? Yeah. That was marginally better, so we're just going to go with that. Hello, everyone. Glad to see you. Hope you all had a fabulous day, and I hope your workshops are going really well. My name's David Simpson. I'm the program director here at the Fine Arts Work Center. My pronouns are he, him, and really glad to see you because we have a great event for you tonight. We are going to hear from writer Michelle T. and artist and past fellow Autumn Wallace. After they do their thing, we'll invite them up at the stage like we did last night to do a Q&A with the audience. Michelle will be signing books at the back after the event, so be sure to check it out. We also have a ton of books by this week's faculty back there. We also have way more books in the bookstore in the middle part of between the two halves of the gallery by former fellows, faculty, other people with historic connections with the Work Center. Also be sure to check out the exhibition that's up there. If you haven't already, it's really wonderful. Summer exhibition called Edge Condition, curated by past Falk fellow Matt Bollinger, and featuring work by 20 or so former fellows. It's wonderful. And if you want to hear more about the history of Provincetown as an arts colony, be here tomorrow at 12:30 because Laura Shabbat, big hand for Laura Shabbat, woo! We'll be doing a really interesting talk on the history of P-Town as an arts community. She knows all there is to know, plus she's hysterical. So that's a really great combination. So if you haven't, bring your lunch. It's totally okay to eat inside. Just don't throw any food at Laura because...
I'll eat it.
Okay. Moving on. Big shout out to East End Books as always for managing our bookstore. Also, want to give a shout out again to our institutional supporters, the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod and the Cape Cod 5 Foundation for so generously supporting our public programming in the summer. Restrooms are still down the hall, water fountain across. We have assisted listening devices if they would make your increase the enjoyment of this event. Also, we still have a couple of cushions left, and if you haven't gotten one already, feel free to run back and get one. And finally, as we always say, you're reaching for your phone, aren't you? That's good. Turn it off. You are. Turn off your phone or turn it to silent so we can give our full and undivided attention to our presenters. So we're going to start off with Michelle T. And to introduce Michelle, I'd like to introduce one of her students and a beloved former employee of the Fine Arts Work Center, Liz Wood, to introduce Michelle.
Thank you, David. Thank you. So I first read Michelle T. when I was a 20-year-old baby. Valencia was passed to me like a secret code across one of the whiskey coke soaked tables of the Lexington, where all the best 20-year-old babies hung out in San Francisco. Reading it really was like being given a key. By rendering her bizarre, messy, beautiful, familiar world, she'd given me permission to think that my words belonged on the page too. And they didn't have to be cloaked in postmodern metatext, flattened into tight, sparse realism, or shrouded and purpled with metaphor. They could just be my words, my messy life, told as I felt it. Beyond publishing over 20 books, which is totally crazy, giving people that secret passcode to creativity has sort of become one of Michelle's things. As co-founder of Sister Spit, she gave new writers and artists a literal platform in the collective's performances, then offered others that beyond coveted affirmation of existence, the publication of a first book, when Sister Spit started an imprint through City Lights Books, and then again as editor of Feminist Press and Amethyst Editions. It's no accident that when I was preparing to interview another feminist literary shepherd about her upcoming anthology earlier this year, I found that Michelle had written the foreword, extending her generosity, joy, and encouragement to its pages. Here at Fox, she has led our workshop with that same spirit of invitation, each exercise granting us permission to trust ourselves and our voices. And coming from her, that means something. She won the Lambda Literary Award for Best Lesbian Fiction, was a 2021 Guggenheim Fellow, is a recipient of the Rona Jaffe Awards and the Pan America Award for the Art of the Essay, has written those 20-plus books, and gives tarot readings that break you open in the most gentle, caring way. I'm beyond honored to introduce Michelle T.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz. That was really sweet. I love having you in the class. Such a good class. I love having everybody in the class. It's amazing. I'm going to read part of a chapter from a book that I have coming out in October called Modern Magic. It's about magic. My publisher was like, we don't want to offend you by having it come out in October. Is that, like, they were afraid, they were like, that's so offensive. Witches aren't just in October. I was like, no, it's fine. Okay. All right. Witches have been so famously loathed and scapegoated for so very long, it's easy to forget that it wasn't always that way. Sometime between folk magic being a very normal, ordinary thing and the torture of witches throughout Europe and the United States, there was a moment in time when even the powerful Catholic Church didn't give too much of a fig about sorcery. It was frowned upon, certainly, but no one was being murdered for it. I'm talking about like the witch hunts, so trigger warning for witch hunts. Perhaps people recalled their mothers and grandmothers whipping up tinctures and following the path of the moon, and so it simply seemed a type of knowledge, female maybe, or from another generation. Perhaps being older and womanly, its power just wasn't taken seriously. Whatever the reason, it's curious to ponder how Christian Europe went from tolerating vestiges of paganism to murdering so many that one village was said to resemble a burned forest. That many charred funeral pyres stood smoking in the cobbled streets. The answer to what happened, a violent witch paranoia strong enough to continue to mark our own times with prejudice, doesn't fall completely on the shoulders of one man, but it sort of kind of does. Heinrich Kramer, a Tyrolean inquisitor, obsessive 15th century incel, prototypical troll, and vengeful German churchman who vowed that his humiliating failure to prosecute a badass Austrian party girl would be the last time such a woman escaped his wrath. His work, the Malleus Maleficarum, I might be saying this wrong, I probably am. I just recorded the audiobook for this, and I learned how to say everything perfectly and then forgot. So you'll see. The Malleus Maleficarum is the tract that established witches as the worst of heretics, imagining their lascivious and patently absurd activities and detailing best practices for proving and punishing their evil. Let's start at the Catholic Inquisition. Its purpose when it was founded in the 1100s was to stomp out heretics, specifically those working against the Catholic Church, undermining its efforts, making statements about Jesus not being God, and other reasonable freedom of religion observations. Many so-called heretics railed against the falseness and hypocrisy of the popes and their riches. The Catholic Church had an if you're not with us, you're against us stance, so to be vocal about finding the Church's teachings fraudulent meant you risked being burned alive as punishment. At the start of the Inquisition, witchcraft was more of a secular problem. If you were accused of harassing your neighbor by way of sorcery, you'd wind up before the king's justices, and they handled the matter. The church wasn't involved in these small claims court dust-ups. But about 100 years in, Pope Alexander IV suggested that individuals chatting with demons and using sorcery to further their will perhaps did equal heresy. The Old Testament was clear about not tolerating spellcasters and fortune tellers and those who consult with ghosts. If these activities were ungodly, then they must fall into the realm of the devil, right? And no one wanted the church to go belly up like Lucifer. Under this pope's new conclusion, in the year 1258, it became acceptable for the Inquisition to try individuals for heresy based on an accusation of witchcraft. Still, that didn't mean that witches were prosecuted for heresy that frequently. The frenzy grew slowly. Famed misogynist Thomas Aquinas fanned the flames, and when the church turned on its own militia, the Knights Templar, in the 1300s, they used charges of witchcraft to bring them down. When Pope John XXII accused one of his bishops of trying to kill him with sorcery in 1317, it again legitimized the accusation. Then in the 1340s, Europe was whacked by the plague, and we all know how a pandemic can make people paranoid and prone to conspiracy. Heinrich Kramer was born around 1430, and sources say he was pretty wild about the church from the get-go. He was young when he joined the Dominicans, the order of monks charged with managing the Inquisition. Heinrich took to it with gusto and was especially psyched to persecute witches. Now, unfortunately for him, though there were theoretical grounds to prosecute witches for heresy, Heinrich found it hard to get a witch before the Inquisition's assessors. I guess that just like today, the medieval period had some folks who trended toward decency and chillness, while others, like Heinrich, veered toward unhinged drama. He had a particularly tough time making a case against a Tyrolean woman named Helena Scuberin in the town of Innsbruck, situated in a snowy, lakey region that encompasses northern Italy and eastern Austria. Helena seems pretty cool. Helena seems pretty cool. Hans P. Brodel, in his book, The Malleus Maleficarum in the Construction of Witchcraft, describes her as an, quote, aggressive, independent woman not afraid to speak her mind. But she found herself on the receiving end of some town gossip after a noble knight named Jorg Spice turned up dead. Before he died, while seeking medical help, he was warned by his doctor to avoid the home of Helena Schuberin. Helena had a rich husband. Maybe they threw big parties. Maybe they were doing opium or drinking beer brewed with belladonna. Maybe noble knight Jorg was hitting the medieval intoxicants too hard at Helena's ragers, and the doctor knew it. Maybe that's what he meant. I mean, I'm deeply speculating here. But it is weird that the doctor was literally, keep away from Helena's house or you'll die, and then he died. Was he having an affair with her and was poisoned by her jealous husband? Maybe he had some sort of dirt on Helena and she was poisoning him. Do I watch too much ID Discovery? Word on the streets of Innsbruck was that it might have been witchcraft. This was the kind of tea Heinrich lived for. Word of this mysterious death, the doctor's ominous warning, Helena's, quote, aggressive, independent personality, the townspeople's gossip of magic, it sends him flying to Innsbruck faster than a colonial witch with a broom up her vagina. He set himself up with some sermons at the local church and gets to harassing his target. But good luck, Heinrich, because the lass lives up to her fearsome reputation. Upon meeting her assessor in the street, Helena jumped in his face, shouting, "Fie on you, you bad monk! May the falling evil take you." Let's hear that again. "Fie on you, you bad monk! May the falling evil take you." I have chills. This is an amazing diss. She's good. Helena mostly avoids Heinrich's sermons, of course, and urges others to as well, and Heinrich takes this as evidence of her sorcery. You would think he'd be happy about her absence, since when she does attend church, she heckles him, calling him, quote, an evil man in league with the devil. Yes, Helena, flip the script. Heinrich eventually managed to begin a trial for Helena, along with some other women, her witchy girl gang, no doubt. But the local authorities weren't having it. Maybe they're team Helena, maybe they don't believe in witchcraft. Maybe they think Heinrich is a nerd, or that the Catholic Church is a bully. Either way, the powers of Innsbruck actually kick Heinrich out of town. I can and will imagine the victory bash Helena and her rich hubby threw when that happened. Let the nightshade-laced mead flow. But a troll doesn't give up that easily. Heinrich was far from done with Helena and the witches of Innsbruck. In a big baby move, he went straight to the Vatican and whined to the Pope about how terribly he was treated in Tyrol, basically asking him to write a note telling everyone that they have to take his authority seriously. Pope Innocent VIII, wait, can you even with these popes? That name is ironic. It's actually offensive. Pope Innocent VIII invested in the trade of enslaved Africans. He ran a scheme targeting noble women and accusing them of heresy so the church could seize their money. And he created positions within the church to be sold to the highest bidder. And he names himself Innocent, like he's a 0-calorie can of LaCroix. Anyway, Pope Innocent does oblige Heinrich. He'd recently promoted the troll to head of the Inquisition, and they were buds. The Pope drew up a papal decree called Summis Desiderantes Effectibus, which is Latin for you better be nice to Heinrich. It affirms that witches are real and they're heretics, that the church has the right to try them, and anyone who fears are themselves heretics and subject to punishment. Heinrich returned to Innsbruck all smug with his papal decree. Let's take a moment to envision this jerk with the help of some existing medieval portraits. Medieval artists had an infamously strange gaze. In some paintings, Heinrich's face appears to be a popped football, his bald head ringed with a classic Dominican fringe. One portrait depicts him as emaciated with a prominent chin waddle. In another, he's plump, his eyes quite near his nose. One portrait is not so odd. His bulky black jacket looks cozy and is stylishly belted. He sports a little beret, and his cheekbones look like the fruits of a YouTube contouring tutorial. Willem Dafoe could convincingly play him in a biopic. He's seated in a little wooden room, caught up in his thoughts, lost in a reverie. He looks like a poet being gently touched by the muse, not like a medieval serial killer penning his macabre how-to book. Okay, now that we're all imagining Willem Dafoe striding into a medieval village, waving a papal bull, let's continue. With the legitimizing church document in hand, the leaders of Innsbruck had less power to evict Heinrich from the village. A witch trial against Helena Schuberin and her best bitches officially commenced. The trial lasted about a month, from Leo season in the summer to Virgo season at the start of fall. It's like right now. What's interesting is, though there were townspeople accusing Helena and company of witchcraft, none of them made mention of the devil. It was the church that was equating witchcraft, pagan folk magic, with Satanism, and Heinrich did bring forth accusations of fraternizing with the devil, celebrating the orgiastic witches' Sabbath, and all that. Apparently, Heinrich based much of his accusation against Helena on her supposed promiscuity. But in spite of these efforts, the trial ended without a confession. There was a month or so of respite. Heinrich left town. Helena returned to her sumptuous home and partied or recuperated. But after not so long, Heinrich was back. He would get a confession from his witch if he had to torture it out of her, which, as we know, was the church's favorite method of extracting confessions for crimes that didn't actually exist. Like the trial, the torturing of Helena and the other accused women lasted about a month. A popular medieval device for such occasions was a hideous contraption called the strappado. A person's hands were tied behind their back, and then they were lifted high into the air so that their body hung heavily, contorted, and their shoulders dislocated as they dangled. Weights were sometimes attached to the body to make an impossibly gruesome situation more so. The victim would generally die within an hour. There were other methods of getting women to confess to non-existent love affairs with Satan. Sleep deprivation often brought about a successful disclosure. After being kept awake by devil-obsessed maniacs for 4 or 5 consecutive nights, who wouldn't start hallucinating they were the consort of the horned god? One of Heinrich's favorite torture tasks was to have an accused witch carry a chunk of red-hot iron for precisely 3 steps without dropping it. If you could do this, you were not a witch, even though it seems it would take supernatural powers to override your body's instinct to toss it from your swiftly blistering hands. If you did have a natural reaction, if you burst into tears and screamed "fuck" and dropped the glowing blob of iron to the ground, you were a witch. A final common torture for the era was the swimming of witches, the famous lose-lose, in which the accused was hog-tied and dropped into water. If she lived, she was a witch and was immediately doused in flames. If she drowned, well, the poor lass had been innocent after all, but she's gone to a better place now, hasn't she? Actually, in this case, maybe. I couldn't find any writings that specified which malevolent method Heinrich employed to manifest a confession from Helena, but a month of torture probably featured a sickening variety. However, at the end of it all, Heinrich lost. The church could not prove that Helena Schuberin had murdered the noble knight Jörg Spies with witchcraft or otherwise. Helena was truly unbreakable. Whatever torture was deployed upon her, she did not crack, and I'd like to imagine the barrage of insults she hurled upon the weaselly inquisitor. Heinrich, as you can tell, was not the sort to adopt a you win some, you lose some attitude about his witch trials. He had a hard time letting go. His obsession with Helena continued to fester, and he stayed in Innsbruck to harass her, even after the local authorities again demanded he leave. It took an appeal to the bishop to finally get him to quit bothering the woman and depart Innsbruck. Heinrich gathered up all his fury and resentment, his wounded Dominican ego and Catholic righteousness, and crawled back under a rock in Cologne, Germany. He focused the storm of psychedelic rage swirling inside him, and he began to write. Published in 1486, the Malleus Maleficarum was Heinrich Kramer's life work, his lasting legacy. Although fellow Dominican Jacob Spranger was listed as a co-author on editions published after 1519, Heinrich died in 1505, and scholars now credit the entire authorship of the Malleus Maleficarum to Heinrich. There's also an internet rumor that Spranger fucking hated Kramer, but I couldn't find anything to really back that up. So what's the Malleus, this medieval piece of revenge porn penned by a 15th century incel, actually about? Heinrich meant it to be the legal bones behind the Christian scripture, "Thou shalt not suffer a sorceress to live." First and foremost, it's a legal document. It includes and elaborates upon Pope Innocent's papal bull instituting witchcraft as heresy. It lobbies the courts of Europe to prosecute it as such. It delineates a sort of best practices for trying witches, advising the judges wear a charm of blessed salt around their neck, that witches should be stripped and shaved and led into the courtroom backwards. It explained how to gain confessions via torture and the sort of punishment by death to pursue once witchery has been established. As burning at the stake was the most traditional way to dispose of heretics in general, it was easily applied to witches. Heinrich believed God would not allow an innocent person to be mistakenly murdered for witchcraft, so that took care of any concern about wrongful death and what have you. Now, officially establishing witchcraft as heresy effectively created another legal rule. It became mandatory that everyone believe in witches and witchcraft, as defined by the church. To deny their evil legitimacy would subject you to their fate. If you perhaps wanted to believe in witches but worried that you just didn't know enough about them or really understand their customs, here's where Heinrich really shines. In the portion of the Malleus that describes what exactly the witches are up to, I think their most interesting recorded activity was causing the penises of men to vanish from their bodies and reappear up high in the treetops, cozied together in a nest, as if they were a flock of baby birds. And like a flock of baby birds, the witches would feed these magically castrated phalluses a meal of oats. Don't believe me? I don't blame you. But let me quote from the book. "What are we to think about those witches who shut up penises in what are sometimes prolific numbers, 20 or 30 at a single time, in a bird's nest or some kind of box, where they move about in order to eat oats and fodder as though they were alive? Something which many people have seen and is reported by common gossip." Many people saw this? Like many? Okay. I mean, common gossip is never wrong. Now, to Heinrich's credit, he didn't think the witches were actually stealing penises from the bodies of men. He wasn't crazy. To remove a penis, you'd need a proper demon's help. And frankly, most witches weren't that powerful. What they could do is make you hallucinate that your penis had vanished and then give you a vision of it eating oats in a tree. Likewise, the witches of medieval Europe couldn't actually turn you into an animal because they didn't have that level of demonic power. They could only make you think they'd turn you into an animal. Props to Heinrich for simultaneously minimizing the witches' powers while affirming their terror and malevolence. Hallucination or no, who wants to look down and find your junk no longer in their pants? Not I. And remember, lest you scoff at this tale and call it unbelievable, you now risk being accused of heresy yourself. The Malleus goes on to relay much delicious witchy doings, such as the tale of a woman, miffed that she had not been invited to a wedding, who flew to the hillside, pissed into a bowl, stirred her urine counterclockwise, and brought down a storm upon the festivities. A great spell to try yourself next time you're feeling left out of your community. Actually, in case you are interested, here's what you need to do to become a medieval-style witch. Much of this lore had already been established by the Catholic Church by the time Heinrich came along, but he elaborated upon and popularized it. First, you must swear off Christianity and enter into a pact with the devil. Check. Next, you put your money where your mouth is and seal the deal by actually having sex with the devil. Check. Now the devil, being satanic, has particular tastes. While he was reportedly a good time in the sack, a seductive lover and all that, he also required his acolytes to prove their love with the osculum infame. Also called the shameful kiss, it was but a kiss upon the devil's anus, or a bit of a medieval rim job, depending upon the enthusiasm of the witch. The devil would then show his appreciation by granting the witch the gift of flight, very important if she was to make it to the frequent witch gatherings in the deepest woods, presided over by Satan himself. Who'd want to miss that? By taking a special ointment made from the fat of unbaptized babies and applying it to a broom or household chair, the objects would then be enchanted enough to serve as a vehicle to get you to the deep woods witch party. Of course, there are theories that the ointments were made with hallucinogens, not baby fat, and then inserted into the vagina via broomstick or chair leg, causing quite a flight. I guess I'll end there. There's more good stuff, though. Thank you.
Dang, more applause for Michelle T, please. Her reading makes me very interested to see what student night is going to be like. I'm just going to leave it there, right there. Okay, now we're going to move on to artist Autumn Wallace, and we're very pleased to welcome one of Autumn's students to the stage to introduce her. Please welcome Maeve O'Donovan.
Hello, I'm Maeve O'Donovan. My parents always said O'Donovan, so I say O'Donovan. Thank you to FOC for once again creating an amazing summer program. It's inspiring, it's exciting to attend these lectures. It's also great to have Chandra here, who's helping us create community. Tonight I have the great pleasure of introducing Autumn Wallace, who is a gifted artist, as you'll see, but she's also a gifted teacher, which I'll talk about a little bit. Autumn Wallace, whose pronouns are they, she, is a visual artist who works across media to create paintings and sculptures that examine human sexuality, gender, and the Black femme experience. Influenced by the early 90s cartoons, Byzantine aesthetics, Baroque style, and what Wallace describes as low-quality adult materials, Wallace's work generates a sense of fluidity, whereby figures defy spatial, social, physical, emotional, and psychological boundaries. A 2018 graduate of Tyler School of Art at Temple University, their work has received the support of residencies, including FOC in 2019-2020, Yaddo, the Lunga School, where Wallace learned to teach, the Bed-Stuy Art Residency, and many more. Wallace has exhibited work at the, I don't know if it's GA or GAA, GA Gallery in New York City, Cologne, Germany, and Provincetown. Their latest exhibit, 40 Knots and How to Tie Them, will be shown at the Josh Lilly Gallery in London later this year. If I can indulge you for a minute longer, I'd like to also introduce Autumn as a teacher. Something you love and cannot explain why. Something you hate and cannot explain why. Guilty pleasures. This was our class materials list. As a philosopher, I've spent my life seeking meaning, writing very long explanations, tearing apart explanations. So how could I love something or hate something and not know why? This, I think, is probably my most challenging art assignment ever. And that's how our class began a few weeks ago, and it's continued in that vein. In just 2 days so far, Autumn has inspired us to recover our silliness, explore the illogical, call to mind that which can't be seen or explained, and at the same time, explore how to explain words in the form of visual art. I find myself reacting to their class much as I do to their paintings, which you'll see, and particularly the bold use of color in their paintings. I want to climb into the spaces she creates and linger there as long as possible. I invite you to do the same as you listen to Autumn now. Thank you.
Whoa. I'm teaching a class on how to speak visually, and here I am about to talk for 15 minutes. First, I have to figure out how to use this thing. Hopefully it's... Can I do it? Is it on? There we go. Okay, so my name's Autumn, but it could have been winter because I was born in the blizzard of '96, but that's too cold a name, and honestly, maybe a bad memory for my mom, so maybe emerald, but she didn't really like the color green, so we stuck with autumn. Anyway, I was born in Philadelphia, home of Philly Elmo, the Philly cheesesteak. Is it gonna load? Come on. There we go, the Philly cheesesteak. Gritty. And Eagles fans who recreationally climb grease poles and flip cars. It's a Philly thing, as the sign says. There, I was raised by a New Age Christian hippie mom and a fundamentalist Christian dad in a household where bedtime stories were read from the Bible only. And shout out if you recognize VeggieTales up there. Awesome. And as Maeve explained, that very specific and pretty cloistered upbringing, has resulted in a body of work hinting at borderline of obsessions with those early 90s cartoons, Ren and Stimpy, Looney Tunes, SpongeBob, Byzantine aesthetics, Renaissance, Baroque, all of that, and then the low-quality adult materials, which were very frowned upon in my home. It all made me a bit shameless, and I tend towards ridicule, but ridicule in the way that I am drawn towards what we like to ridicule. The most ugly bits of being, the squish, folds, wrinkles, sag, sweat, scars, and blood and drool. I relish in the act of taking the things that are seen as ugly in bodies and behaviors and exaggerating them in ways that they become beautiful for the same reasons they've been deemed revolting. Sometimes I even make fun of, there we go. Yeah, I even make fun of my friends accidentally on purpose, but not in their face, but I tell our mutual friends that it's them, but I tell them not to tell them that it's them, you know. As I continued to develop my visual language, I started to realize that clothing functions better as a prop in this world, and the connotations of nudity are really up to the viewer. I started to explore peril, reflecting on my personal experience of eviction in the 2008 housing crisis, showing a metaphorical bridge of that connection between you and your home on fire, gone forever. Speaking of fire, California has this ordinance that all consumer fabrics must be flame retardant. So you, or this character up here, can set a fire every once in a while and put it out yourself or see it go out so you feel like a savior every once in a while. Then I started to have a bit of a creative existential crisis. I was asking myself, what am I doing? Who are these characters? Like, what do they really mean? And I realized that they are all intimate relationships, stories told by me, stories told to me from my ancestors, things that we tell ourselves, all from the experience or perspective of myself as a Black queer femme. Growing up queer and closeted, you have a lot of internal turmoil, and I started to let it out in this sketch. And then in the painting, I was starting to realize all of my turmoil was playing with, we're playing with each other on the subway. If you recognize that subway, shout out. They even began to break out of the closet in their own little world, little by little, even if they couldn't keep their internal storms inside. I started to unearth years of respectability politics, especially those relative to physical presentation. How many people really know the panic of a bonnet coming off your hair at night? Why do we fear being seen as unkempt? Why is it so devastating? Like, yeah, it's the loss of an investment in your hair, but what else? What if this creature that steals bonnets is trying to tell us something? I started to unearth years of slut shaming as well. I even wrote about this one. So I have a tiny little, I'm not gonna call it a poem, but a little writing about it. We tried everything: advanced reverse psychology, gaslighting, daily reminders, major hints, minor hints, paper cuts, map destruction, constant questioning. You name it, we did it. Didn't work. If anything, it only made our job harder. Well, we didn't want to do it. No one does, but it's time. This bombast must come to a stop. It's too much. She's too much. One cannot be ashamed of the things they're too ignorant to hide. Let class begin. I started to question how we get to value judgments at all. Like, how do we choose which plants are desirable and which ones aren't? I started to realize that the most resilient and prosperous plants are the ones that are the most vilified. So I put them in a wreath around this character, Flommy. You can't see her too well because it's a dark painting, but her entire purpose in this world is to be protected. Next, please. Okay. I also started to realize that a lot of ideas of desirability come from external forces, probably colonial forces. forced onto extant cultures to create a false sense of superiority, of hierarchy. And here I was thinking about I don't know if y'all remember that Gucci sweater. They made a blackface Gucci sweater, and then they just moved on. And we're worried about the spotted lanternfly, like, okay. These ideologies claim that something toxic or restrictive is better for you than what's natural, like margarine instead of butter, perms instead of natural, and corsets instead of the beautiful bellies that we're born with. Then I got to FOC. Here I was surrounded by a wonderful group of poets, writers, other artists who introduced me to a Martinician poet and literary critic named, what's his name? Edouard Glissant, there we go, it's French. He had a writing called On Opacity, where he argued that explanation itself of culture, tradition, etc. is reductive, because experience that is lived cannot be summarized and consumed for understanding. So why even try? I began to revise the history of my own life, repair my own memories, and make other better outcomes for those involved. Mediate long gone discussions. You know, dressing the guy that you knew in the skin of your late dog to make a point. Maybe it's just for yourself. I also started to take an emphasis on nurturing oneself and opening yourself up to nurture and rest, because as a Black feminist scholar named Yvette Dion once said, a Black woman's rest is a necessary act of protest and preservation. We need to teach ourselves to rest because our mothers didn't get to and their mothers didn't get to. So we need to reclaim it. And it's very hard to see. I make very dark paintings. But there's a character here under that horse cuddling, and she has little fairy wings because when she's not resting, she's flying. Speaking of nurturing, I also wanted to portray cravings of affection, and cravings of affection that you're afraid to express yourself. So it came out in the form of two characters that choose to remain anonymous, dressing up in a horse costume that's made of blankets to cuddle with the horse girl herself, Bowman. Bowman, in the middle with the sock on her head, is a character inspired by my late grandfather, who was a stable hand. And that was his job before he lost his leg to a pastry truck. Ask me about that story later. But you'll notice both characters only have like 3 legs. Well, Bowman has no visible legs in there, but. So, while I was sifting through all of these thoughts of care and nurturing, I found this wonderful article called How to Hug Yourself, 10 Steps with Pictures. And it was during the pandemic, it's very pandemic, and I could have used a hug myself, so I literally took the idea and ran with it and made a zine. And through the zine, I developed a character named Diary, who's semi-transparent, incorporeal most of the time, except for when she chooses to be tangible, like when she needs to like save or hug anyone, perchance. Here she is, seen saving Flammy, the flamingo, from a situation that we can see is pretty easy to escape. It's a one-sided fence, you could jump right over, but it's the support of Diary that got her to the other side. And here, January, on top of this glass table, is finally able to run a trial period of her newfound sexuality with Diary, who's under the table, so that next time she gets on the app, she won't embarrass herself that badly. There's also the part of the hugs that is very much about self-care, where maybe you're not able to see anyone or get close to anyone, so you have to sign your own cast. And then you look down and see those sweet nothings you wrote to yourself. And if you get the song reference at the top, give me a high five at the end. Hint, he's from Philly. The artist is from Philly. And also, sometimes self-care comes in the form of your own little island with your favorite little or big toy. And maybe sometimes that self-care is more like self-pleasure. Sometimes those self-care moments are purely selfless, but just as rewarding. I'm hoping that you also will get the reference here. The musician's work was just sent to their favorite planet. This one's kind of intense. Here I was starting to incorporate old wives' tales, and there's this one old wives' tale where if you eat like a watermelon seed or an apple seed, your parents say like, oh, it's gonna turn into a tree in your stomach. Well, here it turned into a tree. And Nene on the top, who is functioning as a midwife character, is helping Black Betty, who's at the bottom, Black Betty the rabbit, take care of this problem. And it was supposed to be a very whimsical little piece that I was working on, but it was the summer of 2022, the summer that Roe v. Wade was overturned, and it became very, very real. So here's hoping that we can get that fixed. Nene may have seemed very progressive in that midwife situation in the last piece, but here she's a little maybe old-fashioned. She is scolding Masada, who is at the bottom with Nene's hand on her head for pleasing herself with the produce in her garden. Or maybe it's just because she was trying to make that for dinner, who knows. Then this piece, Split Custody, is turning the spotlight on Nene, literally, because someone, whether it was January in the top right or Wendy in between Nene's legs, opened up the daggone blinds when they know better than to shine a light on things better kept in the dark. No one leaves until she finds out who's responsible. And as I'm going forward in my work, I'm going for even more destruction of the fourth wall, where pieces feel like or actually do take up physical space in our corporeal world, doing whatever they please. And doing exactly that, we see Chia, inspired by the eponymous Chia pet. She's tired of being seen as an ornament, or even worse, as turf. So she will no longer be stepped on. She will no longer tolerate it. She's everywhere. She's pissed. She has eyes on the back of her head. So watch out. I'm gonna give you some more time to look at that one because it's my last slide. She has a moss nose and all. So if you liked anything you saw or heard, I have another book out now, like a real one with an ISBN number. I'm about to, there we go. It doesn't look pretty right now, but it's called 40 Knots and How to Tie Them. And I can like put it in the back so people can look at it, and I'll give you the information to get the book if you'd like it. But thank you.
That was amazing. Can we give it up? Another round of applause for Autumn Wallace. Amazing work. Can we have Michelle and Autumn come back up to the stage so we can do a Q&A? And please, as always, if you have a question, wait for Hannah or Sarah to get to you with a microphone so people watching at home can hear your question. Does anybody have a question for our speakers tonight?
Autumn, do you ever make comics? Is this a comment and a question? Because as a side note, I was just like, all I want is to read this as a comic. All I want is to know more about these characters who have rich inside worlds, and I want to read it as a comic.
Same.
Well, thank you. I am one of those people that I think I need to be assigned it, maybe in the form of a class. So next time, I'll do it. But the book has some of the character stories, and I'll let you look through it, and you can tell me how it can be better. And then you had a question.
Yeah, I'm just, this was, I thought, spectacular and just compellingly interesting, and my head is swimming with the thought of the kinship between your two presentations, and I'm trying to figure some of that is the iconoclasm, the curiosity, are two things that struck about the world, and the oblique angle from which you both look at things and emotions and people. I just wonder if either one of you or both of you would like to reflect on what you also noticed as sort of kindred elements in what you both were saying.
I love Autumn's work very much. I feel like, I don't know, we're both queer femmes, and maybe there's a link there in the queer feminist of it all. I think you've got a lot of Aquarius in your chart. I am an Aquarius.
I do.
You're a Capricorn. I got a little Capricorn. I don't know. Yeah, could be something. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Michelle's work. Unfortunately, I didn't know it before the workshop, but now I'm about to buy all 20 of your books, I guess.
Now.
Because all the workshop money goes into your books. But I love your contemporary approach to history, because that's what we need so much nowadays. Like, we can't just look back at history and see it in context without that reflexive lens, because we're just like, I mean, okay, that happened, but like, what does it mean that it happened? And
And we can put our own spin on it, you know, and like we get to tell these histories, you know, with our perspectives. Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, a lot of what you told us tonight was secret. It was buried. And I'm just curious how you even knew to start digging for it. I mean, I've never heard a lot of that. And where does it lie? Where was it?
On the interweb. It's all on the interwebs. Yeah, it really is. I just did a lot of deep dives after deep dives. And there was that book that I referenced about the Malleus Maleficarum that held the story of Helena Schuberin, which was so juicy and like, wow, it really was, you know, and you just think like those people weren't, I mean, I'm sure they were very different from us and then also not that different from us. And it was just some like psycho guy getting obsessed with a cool woman and just like, you know, using his power and to like wild, like far reaching consequences, right? Yeah. But yeah, it's all out there. I mean, I think that it's not that secret. I don't understand how, I don't know, people just don't ask the questions, I guess, or look for it. Like, I guess people just don't ask, like, why do we not like witches? Or like, what is a witch really? You know, like just these basic questions could lead you kind of not without that much difficulty to learning what I learned. Yeah. That's amazing. Thank you.
This is for you, Michelle. So a lot of what you write is so personal and so memoir, and this was so research-based, and I'm really curious how the process is different for you, like which is harder, or how is one different from the other?
It sort of depends almost where I'm at the moment. Like I'll have moments or eras when I feel really ravenous to write about my own experience, and then I get really burnt out on it, and it's such a relief to find inspiration lies in other places as well. And I'm not like compulsively doomed to always write about my own experience, but I can also take the same curiosity can kind of go somewhere else. And I mean, and it's weird because obviously what I read tonight's not my experience, but it felt like my experience, you know? I was like, oh, I know these jerks. I know these medieval jerks, you know? I know Helena, you know? And so it felt very contemporary and it felt fun for me to bring it into the moment. But yeah, it's just, and then, or sometimes I'll just like want to write about myself, but not about necessarily my life. So I'll want to go and do something and then write about what I've done, you know, in a journalistic way. So yeah, I know now. I just have different inspirations, and it's easy to think that it's only one thing, and it's always a relief to learn that it's transferable, kind of. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you both for these fantastic presentations. Oh my gosh. I have a question for you, Autumn. Excuse me. I see you've got a lot of musical references that you're playing with it in your titles and other things. And I'd love to hear you talk about how music kind of impacts the work that you're doing. And if I get a twofer, I'd also love to see like how that fed into your fellowship year, like how that changed your work, if it did, etc.
So from way back when, I would listen to songs and I would see colors and I didn't really know what was going on. I was like, oh yeah, that song's just like orange, like you don't see that? And they're like, no, a song is audible. So I like, when Google came out, I was like, okay, do other people here like see music? And there's a thing called like synesthesia, and that really fed into my work because I would be able to like show people what I heard in the paintings finally. As I learned how to glaze, as I got better colors, I was like, oh, like that's that note, that's what her voice sounds like. So yeah, that's how that went. And how the music fed into folk.
Well, I'm just thinking about, kind of being here over the winter and what your music, your work.
Yeah, there was so much incredible music coming out during that time because everyone was just in lockdown, like producing. So I feel like I started to find more music that I felt looked like my work instead of vice versa. Like trying to make work that looks like the music, now I felt like I was finding a kinship in like hyperpop and like a bunch of weird SoundCloud music. So I hope that answers the question. Mm-hmm.
This is a question for Autumn. I was so excited to see how you started making sculptures, and I wasn't able to see like the scale or the materials. One of them totally looked like cake. I was hoping it was cake. I don't think it was cake. But how did you start? Is it cake? No, how did you start making sculpture? Where are they? And what materials do you use? And what's next for you with sculpture?
Yes. So yeah, I should get some pictures for scale. Good note. It was not cake. They're all different things. And I'm going to first like tell you why I make the sculptures and the paintings, and then I'll tell you more about the materials. So the paintings are screenshots of the lives of the characters, and then the sculptures are like me getting to know the character in their like 360 form. And the large ones are foam and steel and leather, found leather. I'm not supporting that industry. So all the materials that are animal sourced, I find secondhand or third hand or in like a literal scrap bin. And yeah, all of the beads, some of them are found, some of them are vintage, and a lot of them are deconstructed, like costume jewelry. There we go. Yeah, deconstructed costume jewelry that I'm just like smashing onto something and hoping it turns into a little living being. Yeah, did that answer it?
And the scale, like, are they?
Yes. So Chia that I showed you is that size, so like a 2 by 4 feet ish. But they can be as small as Barbie scale, like something anything was about, tall Barbie. I'm working on one right now that's like 6 feet in diameter and 4 feet high, and she's gonna be at Basel in Miami, if you're gonna be down there.
Thank you both for sharing such wonderful offerings to us, and also love the boots and just together. It's just giving, it's giving exactly what we need. I noticed a common theme in both of taboo and curiosity about taboo, and I was wondering especially for Autumn, you mentioned having a home where one parent was one way and the other was a little more on the VeggieTales vibe. And I was wondering about, as artists, how do either of you feel about coming to like courage or giving yourself permission, or however you think about it, in terms of being courageous to tell stories that are taboo, or look in the underbelly and the fat rolls and the drool and all that stuff, because it's very, it can be risky, right? So, for both of you.
Oh, okay. You know, it varies. I used to be a lot bolder or more fearless about it when I was younger, because I was like an active alcoholic, which gives you a lot of false bravado, which is like super helpful when you're starting out. And you can coast on that for a while after you get sober, and then you've been sober for a while and you're like, I'm really gonna tell the world about this weird thing, you know? So I don't know, you just have to keep trusting that it's meaningful, you know? And if there's, I do have like a, I don't know, like I do have a desire or a drive to write about the taboo, or what feels scary to write about also feels compelling to write about. And so I don't know, I just keep pushing myself to do it. And it's helpful to be in a writing community that supports and values that, because it's really easy to fall into your own self-doubt for sure. And there's always tons in the culture that will encourage you to shut up and go away. So it's really important to find your literary people, your art people.
Very much so. There are two things that I wanted to mention. One thing that got me feeling more fearless was the Do letter by Sol LeWitt to Eva Hesse. I gave it to my students, and I recommend that everyone looked at it, where she was having like this crazy artist block. She kept telling herself that nothing was working, everything was bad, and he was like, just stop that. Just do everything that you think is bad because you think it's bad. Like, actively fail. Do something you know is not gonna work, and keep doing that. So,
God, that almost gets me high. Like, that's so good. It's so good. Yes.
I like print it everywhere I go, and I like tack it on the refrigerator, like, you need this. And they're like, I'm a banker. But like, it's so good. And then the second thing is one thing that I've heard from Lisa Yuskavage, but a ton of artists also say this: if it scares you, keep going. Like 100%, if it scares you, keep going. Because like, you're in your studio, you're alone, or maybe you're in a communal studio, but like, you know, worst case scenario, you can like set it on fire. Best case scenario, it tells you something you didn't even know about yourself. So, man.
Hi, this question's for Autumn. I'm wondering about your characters. I'm wondering, like, how do they visit you? Do they stay with you? Like, are they all in the same universe? Do they, like, talk to each other? And then, like, how long? And, yeah, I'm just wondering what your relationship to the characters is.
It's like that's an amazing question. It's also difficult to answer, because I would just draw blindly for a while. Like, every day I was trying to like complete a drawing, complete a painting, see what I can do. And then when I had that existential crisis and was like, but like, why? I had to say to myself, like, oh, that character is my mother, or oh, that character is my dog, but also that boy, or oh, this character is just my internalized homophobia. And I had to remind myself, like, not remind myself, but tell myself, like, this is why these characters exist, so they can kind of do therapy for me before I could afford therapy. And now they exist to interact with each other and help each other out. Like, there is that character Flami, whose entire purpose is to be helped. Masada, who you saw in a couple of the paintings, her name in Swahili means like caregiver. So she's around, not letting anyone care for her, but is caring for other people, so how can we fix that? And yeah, they're always like in each other's labs trying to destroy or repair depending on the piece. Yeah.
Okay, let's have another big round of applause for Autumn Wallace and Michelle T. Woo! Amazing. Remember, Michelle's going to be signing books at the back of the room, and don't forget to come back tomorrow because we have one more awesome faculty event tomorrow featuring artist Mark